and plants that are quite useful for the purpose of medicinal. Mr. Speaker, we need to carry out research in our country to make sure that those seedlings are useful. You will see that today, if you go to the chemists and hospitals to buy those drugs, they are quite expensive. When we have actually trees and herbs that are available to ourselves, and it's only a matter of actually financing research to make sure that they are utilized properly and they are going to be used in a proper manner, then they can be able to help our country. And we need to license those individuals who are ready to convert the trees and plants for the purpose of medicinal purposes. Otherwise, I wish to congratulate Senator Haji for this important amendment to the bill, and I hope it will see the light of the day, and also implementation of the same by relevant institution. And also we should be able to, Mr. Speaker, finally, to domesticate international obligations as far as we are concerned in our country, because you will find sometimes you have international obligations at the national, at the international level, but most of the time we don't domesticate them. And that has also been provided for in the bill, and I hope it will be able to help us and enrich the bill, and also the objective it was actually proposed for. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Dula. Senator Miraj.
Asante Bwana Spika kwa kuweza kunipa fursa na mimi niweze kuchangia katika mswada huu ambao umeweza kupendekezwa na seneta kutoka gatuzi ya Garissa. Kwa kweli Bwana Spika, nikiweza kuungana na maseneta waliotangulia, ni dhahiri shahiri ya kwamba mabadiliko ya tabia nchi yamezuru mazingira yetu sisi kama taifa, hususan kule ambao ni maeneo ambayo hayana maji yameweza kuwa kame zaidi, na maeneo ambayo yanaweza kupata mvua yamepata mvua ya kupitiliza hadi kuharibu mimea ambayo ilikuwa iwe chakula cha kitaifa. Bwana Spika, niweze kupongeza anwani inayopendekeza kuweza kupandwa kwa miti mingi zaidi katika maeneo kame. Hii ni dhahiri shahiri ya kwamba rais wetu alipoingia mamlakani aliweza kutenga siku moja ya kitaifa na kuweza kuiweka huru ili taifa zima liweze kupanda miti. Na katika kauli yake mbiu aliweza kupendekeza ya kwamba wakati tunakata keki siku zetu za kuzaliwa, tusiweze kukata keki bali kupanda mti ili kuhakikisha kizazi kinachokuja kinaweza kujivunia kwa yale ambayo tumewatayarishia kuhusiana na mabadiliko tabia nchi. Nikitaka kuwapongeza washikadau tofauti katika gatuzi yangu ya Mombasa, akiwemo mbunge wa Jomvu Bwana Badi Twalib akishirikiana na Wizara ya Usalama wa Ndani, ambao mpaka sasa wameweza kupanda miti takriban 100,000 katika maeneo ya Ganahola Creek. Bila kumsahau kakangu Amarba Wazir ambaye amejitolea kidedea kuweza kuhakikisha kwamba gatuzi yetu ya Mombasa imeweza kupandwa miti mingi zaidi. Bila ya kumsahau waziri wangu wa mabadiliko tabia nchi Bi Emily, natumai utaweza kupata ujumbe huu. Uliweza kuja kwa ofisi yangu ya seneta maalum na ukataka ushirikiano kwamba na Mombasa kweli ni gatuzi ndogo ambayo haina sehemu nyingi za kuweza kupanda miti. Lakini kwa kauli yako mwaka wa 2023 tarehe 22 tuliweza kushirikiana pamoja na wakfu wa Mama Haki kuweza kupanda miti 200 katika maeneo ya Kikoani Cemetery. Hii ni kuonesha jitihada na umoja baina ya viongozi wa serikali kuu na serikali ya ugatuzi kuweza kuona kwamba tunaifikia ile ruwaza ya kupanda miti bilioni 1 katika taifa letu la Kenya. Bwana Spika, kuna mapendekezo ya kwamba katika gatuzi zetu 47 kwenye mswada huu tuweze kuwa na nasari. Nimefurahi sana kuona kwamba sisi kama bunge la seneti tumekuja kuweza kuoanisha malengo yetu kama wasimamizi wa magatuzi 47, kuona ya kwamba tunafikia ruwaza ya kiulimwengu, kwa sababu mabadiliko ya tabia ya nchi hayatuzuru sisi tu kama taifa la Kenya, bali yanazuru mataifa ulimwenguni. Ndiposa tusipojipanga kuweza kutunga sheria kama hizi na kujipanga na vitendo, basi tutaenda kuangamia kama ulimwengu. Bwana Spika, baada ya uteuzi wangu niliweza kuwa na azma ya kutaka kupanda miti 1,000,000 katika gatuzi 6 za mkoa wa zamani wa Pwani. Nashukuru kwa ushirikiano na taasisi tofauti pamoja na madirekta wa wakfu wangu, tuliweza kuanza kupanda miti maeneo ya Dongo Kundu kule juu, na kwa hakika tumeambiwa na kuimbiwa wimbo wa kwamba ni tabia yetu sisi hati viongozi wa kisiasa kufanya jambo, kupiga picha na kuondoka. Lakini kwa sababu nilikuwa na ari, Bwana Spika, niliweza kutafuta vijana wa kike ambao waliweza kutelekezwa wakapata mimba za mapema, nikawabunia ajira, na nimekuwa nikiwalipa kiwango cha shilingi 200 kila Ijumaa waweze kuenda kuangalia ile miti ambayo tuliipanda na waweze kuinyunyizia maji. Karibuni nimeweza kutembelea Wizara ya Defense na tukakaa chini na waziri, tukasema badala ya kuzunguka kila mahali kuenda kutafuta mahali pa kupanda miti ambayo inakuwa changamoto, tumeweza kama wakfu wa Mama Haki, Bwana Spika, kutambua eneo la ziwa ambalo liko maeneo ya Likoni na kuliadopt ili tuweze kupanda ile miti 500,000 ambayo mengine 100,000 tutapanda katika gatuzi tofauti. Bwana Spika, naezungumzia haya kwa mapenzi makubwa kwa sababu sisi ni viongozi, na imesemekana kwamba viongozi ni watu ambao wanastahiki kuangalia maisha ya vizazi vinavyokuja na sio kuangalia kura zinazokuja. Hivyo basi napenda kumpongeza kakangu seneta aliyekuja na mswada huu, na nimpongeze kwa kumwambia ya kwamba historia itakukumbuka kwa sababu umekuja kutatua tatizo ambalo kwa hivi sasa tunaliona tatizo dogo, lakini ni tatizo kubwa. Na ili kufaulu katika hatua kubwa ni lazima tuanze na hatua ndogo. Ninaamini kwamba sheria hii itakapowekwa sahihi na rais wetu wa taifa la Kenya, basi kutakuwa na mageuzi makubwa. Yangu ni kurai kwamba tunapokuwa tuna implement, Bwana Spika, haya mapendekezo ya sheria, ni pendekezo langu kwamba tuweze kuwaweka vijana wa taifa la Kenya ambao wamekumbwa na changamoto ya ajira. Tuweze kuwaweka wale watoto wa kike ambao wametelekezwa kwa kupewa ujauzito, kwa hivyo wamekosa kuwa na imani ya kwamba wanaweza kutoboa katika maisha. Tuwape majukumu, tuwatwike majukumu ya kuweza kusimamia nasari hizi ambazo tunaweza kwenda kuziweka. Hii miche itakayokuwa inapandwa iwe ni miche ambayo itasimamiwa na vijana wa kike na wa kiume wa taifa la Kenya. Iwe ni njia mojawapo ambayo tumewabunia ajira. Kwa hayo mengi machache, hongera kaka, na ningependa bunge hili iweze kuibeba kwa uzito mkubwa sheria hii. Asante Bwana Spika.
Asante sana Senator Miraj. Ndampa nafasi Senator Veronica Maina. Give Senator Veronica the microphone, please.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Proceed, Senator.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this opportunity. And let me take this opportunity, first of all, to congratulate the Honorable Senator Abdul Mohamed Haji, the able Senator of Garissa County, for bringing up these much-needed amendments to the legislation that relates to the forest management, afforestation and reforestation of our forests. Let me first say the reason why these amendments are so crucial and timely is because a time has come for counties to be very intentional in how they promote afforestation and reforestation. I say this, Mr. Speaker, because we have seen the number of activities that the counties are engaging in, and a lot of questions should arise in the audit of the activities of the counties and the impact of the activities or how resources are being allocated to various functions in the county, and the usefulness of the resources, the utility of these resources by the counties. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is unfortunate that even when we have had a policy of afforestation, the counties have not taken up this challenge in a robust manner to secure our future and the future of our generation, especially in light of the climate change, which has posed a lot of danger to the existence of our communities, existence of our livelihoods, and even our very own existence as human beings, Honorable Speaker. If you visit other jurisdictions, you will find that governments and communities have become very sensitive to how the environment is being managed and how it's being conserved. Indeed, many incentives are offered in other jurisdictions for proper conservation and for proper management of forests, conservations of a natural environment, including lakes and seas, Mr. Speaker. But unfortunately, we have not reached a level of sensitivity within our governance system where it becomes a lifestyle, Honorable Speaker, like what we have seen in places like in Norway. Honorable Speaker, if you visit, you have a chance to visit Norway or Sweden, you will be amazed by the number of forests that are in that area. You'll actually not know you have arrived at their capital city because the forest cover is very high, Honorable Speaker. However, we have had the very unfortunate incidents that pollution from other places has actually, through climate change, affected how our forests have been conserved, how our environment has taken up the climate change, Honorable Speaker, and it is time that these amendments are introduced and become law so that we move from policy to law and bind governments, both levels of government, both at national and at county level, to ensure that it has become our responsibility to implement management plans to ensure all forests, including public forests, Mr. Speaker, are properly conserved and properly managed. Honorable Speaker, we have noted also, and I have noted, Honorable Speaker, that unfortunately this has remained a call from the national government, which is a lone call and only happens if a certain date is stated as a National Tree Planting Day. However, this legislation now must make it a grassroots lifestyle, Mr. Speaker, so that every corner of this nation can then enjoy a better forest cover. And eventually, Mr. Speaker, you find that even food security will be more assured with a better forest cover. If I look at the expanded functions of the service, I want to congratulate the Honorable Speaker, because it has captured even a sort of an audit system for the forest cover after implementation of this legislation. And I've also noted part of the purpose of this legislation is to go beyond governments and reach out to corporates to be part, and private sector and private entities, community-based organizations, to be part of this exercise of afforestation and reforestation, Mr. Speaker, so that it does not become the president himself calling for 10 billion tree cover. His lone voice alone will not be able to help the whole nation. It has to be a call that must go down to even families, Honorable Speaker, that every family, whatever land they have, they must look and see how much trees can we plant within this homestead. And Honorable Speaker, when we're talking about the trees, it's not just the normal indigenous trees. It is even the fruit trees, which become useful to the families, useful to the community. They also bring in the income from the excess harvest they might have within the homestead. So it is encouraged that everybody takes part of this exercise, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say that Finally, we have a legislation that is encouraging even the KRA, our taxman now, to give incentives to corporates and private entities that participate within their community-based, within their CSR mandate. If they can participate in tree planting and demonstrate they have been able to do that, they will have tax deductions. I am hoping someday we are now going to see KRA advertising these incentives to attract investment and contribution from the corporate sector. Honorable Speaker, we know most of the time KRA is known for advertising for people to pay taxes. And as a result, when anybody sees a KRA coming on the screen, they even shake. Some would even switch off the TV fearing that KRA is knocking at their doors. For once, because I know they have needed to mend that image and make it a little better, I hope KRA will seize this opportunity to now advertise incentives and help us do this forest cover across the whole country. In fact, if they do a good job in this advertisement, you will be shocked to see that Safaricom will be the first online to go out to do tree planting. Kenya Airways, whom we have been discussing a lot about in this house, and we are happy to note now, they are posting profits. They are not posting losses after this house had made a very heated, animated debate on why KQ should not be allowed to continue existing. But it is good to see they have been turning around, and I hope they continue to improve their service. We will be seeing Kenya Airways being in the lead in ensuring that we have a forest cover. And corporates are going to account to the public on what they are doing, even in tree planting in different counties. EABL, which has been very, it has been very strategic in the manner in which it's handling matters of environment. We want to see a better report, even from EABL. Improve the tree cover in the counties. And of course, there are many other corporates and entities which are within the Republic of Kenya, which can assist in making sure that we have tree planting programs, and also including the youths in the program. Honorable Speaker, can you imagine that entities may not even have, people may not even have enough seedlings to go planting out there, while working with county government, national government, private entities, the youths can be engaged to do the tree planting nurseries. What has stopped us from doing that? Why can't we now then, after this legislation is passed, use this legislation to ensure that our youths are engaged? And I want to request the Honorable Senator to ensure that in the crafting of this bill, you do an incorporation of how the youths who are energetic and whose energy can be used for tree planting nurseries, for grooming nurseries, to come on board and help us do the seedlings. And I want to also say, looking at the functions that have been assigned under Section 8 of this, the Environmental Laws Amendment Bill 2024, when I look at those functions, and I look at the service being entrusted with ensuring that they implement management plans, in those plans, we want to see inclusion of the youths and the women. And why do I say this? Because I have noted certain groups of women have been trying to do the tree nurseries, Honorable Speaker. And we must be able to encourage them. And I want to ask the private entities to be able to pick up those groups, not those groups who are managing those tree nurseries, and ensure that they are propped up, they are funded, and they are paid for the time they are using to do the tree planting activities. And the service should be mandated together, working together with county governments to ensure that the research is properly done for all the counties, so that the species of trees which are not suitable for certain counties must not be allowed to grow in certain counties, or must not be planted, so that it's not a blind exercise. It is an exercise that is informed by research and is informed by best species being sent to the accurate counties to avoid a situation where we have the blue gum. It is called, in Kikuyu, it's called ni kama inakunywa maji. It sucks water from the soil. We should not have that blue gum within the areas where it is just accumulating and taking water away from the environment. But in its place, we should have the scientific researchers tell the counties what kind of trees are suitable to which counties. So this service has a lot of work to do. And they must work, not in a commercialized sense, but driven by purpose to ensure that counties will benefit from this legislation. And then, Honorable Speaker, I want to call out and to congratulate the groups that have been doing certain very good work. Babu Project Group, which is driven by 20 women groups in Kamahoha Ward. I have not known them myself, but they have reached out to my office to say that they are doing bamboo for Kenya, and they are women groups. They have organized themselves, made their own initiative, and if these grassroots women can do that, how much more can each of us then do to ensure that we promote afforestation and reforestation? And even for ourselves as individuals, what is it that we can do to help these groups become better? If you are a teacher, a doctor, a professional in your county, can you not support 2-3 groups yourself and ensure that even if you can't do the tree planting yourself, another person is doing the tree planting? It's how innovative we become. That's how we are going to be able to achieve the targets for the number of trees we must plant to ensure that we have proper afforestation and reforestation. Let me also say, Honorable Speaker, that this legislation now seems to lock down on support from even organizations beyond the private entities, including religious organizations, CBOs, mosques, temples, all those organizations which are able to mobilize people. Can we then have a day when all the Christian churches say, today is our day for planting trees? Can we have a day when all the mosques say, today we are the ones driving the tree planting exercise? Because we realize when finally the environment is so bad that it can no longer yield our soils can no longer yield adequate food, it becomes a problem for all of us. It's not just a problem for the government. And then I want to challenge our honorable senator, who's done a very good job in these amendments, to ensure that this legislation, this amendment, is comprehensive in nature. We must no longer have forests like Gong Forest becoming a real scare for anybody passing near there, thinking that if you have a tire burst anywhere near Gong Forest at night, the worst that would happen to you because you are next to a forest is insecurity. We must have a comprehensive legislation that looks at the wholesome factors that are affecting our forests right now as they are situated, from the time of planting, to watering, to growth, to maturity of those trees, to harvesting, to rewards for people who are doing the right thing in afforestation and reforestation, and entities doing the right thing, and to penal sanctions for those who have missed the point, and for those who are doing deforestation in a manner that is outside the framework of this legislation. And, Honorable Speaker, when I speak of security now around these forests, Honorable Speaker, let me note that we have faced a crisis on issues of femicide. It is unfortunate that we find that sometimes the women who have been butchered, their bodies have either been thrown in rivers or have been thrown in forests. Honorable Speaker, and not just the women, even all persons that may have faced such calamities, Honorable Speaker, it is a big shame and it is terrible. We must also ensure that this forest, the legislation covers the security aspect of the forest, so that if a community or a CBO is going to do reforestation in places like Wanjerere up there in Muranga or in Kiamoturi, those women are safe, those youths are safe, to make sure that the exercise continues to become not just challenging, but it becomes rewarding, and it becomes something that the community is appreciating. With those many remarks, or few remarks, I want to congratulate the Senator and to hope that this environmental laws amendment bill will be passed by the rest of the senators. Thank you.
Senator Wamatinga Wahome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also contribute to this important amendment that has been moved by a member of County of Garissa, the Senator for Garissa. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, environmental conservation, afforestation, and taking care of the climate change, ensuring that our future generation get a sustainable environment, is a responsibility that we have both legally and morally. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, it cannot be overemphasized that climate change has led mostly the third world countries in Africa to suffer the most. We've seen changes in rainfall pattern, we've seen extreme droughts, we've seen extreme floods, and Mr. Speaker, these has mostly affected children and women living in the rural setups. It is also not lost to us, Mr. Speaker, that fundamentally most of the African nations, Kenya included, failed to establish well-structured urban setups, and therefore, whenever there are disasters that has been occasioned by floods, they suffer the most. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would want, therefore, to take this opportunity to thank the Senator for Garissa for having come up with these amendments, because this is what Kenyans are expecting from us. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is in this line that Wamatinga Foundation, one that I founded and lead, established a club toto in primary schools, club teen in secondary schools, so that we can try to encourage the youngsters at their young age to take the environmental protection, tree planting, and most importantly, tree growing as their responsibility. We know that we have had this campaign in successful governments, but, Mr. Speaker, an important misstep that we've continued to miss is that we plant trees, but we don't grow them. Many a times, we've gone on drives and mass planting trees, but then they are left at the mercy of the nature to mature. This is one of the major challenges, and therefore, we need to have a change, a paradigm shift in the way we do it. We move from tree planting to tree growing. And this can only happen if we embrace a culture that will encourage people, and I like what my fellow senator, nominated senator and the future of Murang'a has said, that indeed we must create incentives around tree planting so that it does not only attract tax relief, but also in a way that corporates can be able to engage in a way that they'll reduce their tax burden. This way, Mr. Speaker, we'll create enough incentives so that we can ensure that corporates participate in tree planting and tree growing, and we can see that these trees get to maturity. Mr. Speaker, we know that there are new emerging markets of carbon trade. These, and I'm happy to be a part of the RANS committee that tried to debate and debated on the way it can become tradable in the local market. Mr. Speaker, it is also not lost to us that the change in the geopolitics internationally, and more so the election of a new president, Donald Trump, who does not seem to put as much emphasis in extending the helping hand to the third world countries, it is a challenge to us to come up with innovative approaches that will ensure that we sustain our projects without over-reliance on donor funds. And this is why, Mr. Speaker, sir, I would want to thank and to encourage all Kenyans, and mostly I would want to start by thanking the President for the introduction of some of these taxes, that is like the eco-levy, that will ensure that people are enticed not to consume goods produced from outside, but at the same time, a kind of a tax regime that will ensure that those who produce locally and environmentally friendly goods also get a kind of tax relief. And these are some of the things, Mr. Speaker, that I think we as senators should be on the forefront to champion, because we must now look at the world dynamics and be also fully aware that the change of geopolitics in the world can affect this country, because mostly we've relied on budgetary bridging gap measures that are donor-driven. Mr. Speaker, having said that, I would want also to say that it is also our role as senators to encourage our county governments to ensure that they embrace agroforestry as a way of employment. Mr. Speaker, sir, trade in forest product can be a good source of employment, also a good source of own source revenue for the county government. But this can only happen if we ensure that we encourage our people, we encourage our counties to not only create a nurseries for seedlings, but also to portion a substantial amount of money in this sector, so that as we seek to protect the environment, we'll also be increasing our own source revenue at the same time. Mr. Speaker, sir, it has been said, and I want also to emphasize, there are some species of trees that have been planted, and it is also important to note that the colonialists introduced these species of tree because by the time they were coming to colonize this country, there was a lot of swamps around, and therefore they brought a brugam, eucalyptus, so it's called, so that they could be able to absorb as much water. Several years down the line, Mr. Speaker, now we have a situation where we have a declining water level, we have declining riparians, we have declining rivers, and therefore, we should also, as a government, ensure that we make planting of eucalyptus, or commonly known as the brugam, illegal, and the ones that have been planted, and especially along the riverbanks, should be felled, because if we don't do that, then we know that we will be encouraging desertification, and most importantly, we will be seeing that the water levels in our land continues to reduce. Mr. Speaker, sir, finally, as I wind up, I want to also encourage members as we embrace the tree planting day. It is also a responsibility that we should take. Whichever occasion one attends, be it a church, be it a wedding, be it a funeral, be it a fundraiser, to sensitize people on the importance of ensuring that we grow these trees. It has been said here, and I don't want to repeat it, some of the trees are not only of medicinal value, some of them like fruit tree, avocado, mangoes, oranges, can also be used as an alternative source of food, and especially now that we know that moving forward we'll be relying a little more on the donor-driven and on locally produced goods. Mr. Speaker, sir, as I congratulate the member for Garissa, I would want to say that I would be a happy person to see this being realized. But we should not stop there. We should go ahead and say the corporate world, led by the KLA, led by the government organizations, we must join up as a team and ensure that moving forward, this country does not only become green, but it also becomes sustainable for the future generation, because that is our obligation, and we must ensure that we do that. And therefore, that is why, Mr. Speaker, sir, I personally established the Matinga Foundation, which has now so far planted over 500,000 seedlings, and we will continue. And the way we are doing it is we are giving kids, and we've come up with an approach where we give school-going children and adopt a seedling, and then they grow with it. By the time they finish their school, they'll see that indeed it is in their hands to transform this country. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I support. Madam Speaker, I support.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Kisang.
Good. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I arise, Madam Speaker, to support this forward-looking bill, amendment bill by Senator from Garissa, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I remember 80s when I was in primary school and high school, and also early 90s, Madam Speaker, there was a lot of campaign across the country by the former president, the late Daniel Arap Moi, on afforestation. And campaigns went throughout the year. When in primary school, children were encouraged to plant trees and grow trees. And when you go back to your former primary schools or high school, Madam Speaker, and you see the number of trees that we grew, you get proud. Proud, Madam Speaker, because of what we did. And in a great way, it assisted in terms of the climate change, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I think there was an issue between 2003 2003 up to 2013, Madam Speaker, I think there was some, we did not do proper campaign. Even up to 2022, Madam Speaker, we didn't do a lot of campaign on afforestation, Madam Speaker. That is why you see the lakes across the Rift Valley, Madam Speaker, there has been a rise in the volume because of climate change, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we need to go back to those days and ensure we use our children in primary school, our children in secondary school to grow, to plant and grow trees so that we ensure we reach the 15 billion target of trees by 2030, Madam Speaker. You know, it's not easy to reach 15 billion if we don't use all avenues to ensure that we plant trees and grow trees, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there are very many benefits when we do afforestation. Apart from medicinal, getting basically source of water, getting timber, Madam Speaker, this is something that we need. And I thank the Senator for coming up with this amendment, and we ensure that we also incorporate and urge our counties, because the counties have resources. The National CDF fund also has a 2% on the funds they receive on environment, Madam Speaker, which, if utilized very well, basically it means all our constituencies across the county, across the country, Madam Speaker, everybody will plant something. And this will enhance and will also increase our forest cover, Madam Speaker. In fact, Madam Speaker, if you check the current percentage of our forest cover, it's only a few counties that have more than 10% forest cover, Madam Speaker. We need to find an incentive, a way of incentivizing the communities so that they know, Madam Speaker, that growing trees is beneficial to the community, it's beneficial to the county, Madam Speaker. I know we passed the mining bill and a while ago, Madam Speaker, and there were some percentages, even the Energy Act, there's a percentage that goes to the community where these mineral resources are found. There's also a percentage that goes to the county, Madam Speaker. I think it's about 20 and 5%, Madam Speaker. We also need to, during this particular amendment, Senator Aji, maybe we need to bring additional amendments so that when KFS does harvest, what does the community get? What does the county get? You know, so that, you know, the communities are taking care of the forest, but when KFS does the harvest, what remains at the county? What remains with the community? So that they own it. Otherwise, for now, there is nothing that is incentivizing the community to protect the forest. So I believe we need to bring additional amendments here so that to encourage our people, so that they know it's their own resource. They are protecting the forest, but when KFS harvest, basically they take all the money. In fact, we also need to agree and also put in this particular amendment bill, Senator Aji, a percentage. When KFS advertises for harvest of the trees, we need to set a percentage for the local sawmillers within the county, within the locality. Because sometimes they advertise and all the big millers, they harvest and the community, they don't benefit at all. So they don't see the reason why they are protecting this particular forest, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I also have noted the introduction of having a afforestation week, and you have given a proposal between 15th of March up to 22nd of March, Madam Speaker. I believe we also need to look at this briefly, because we know very well by April normally in our country, because we know our weather pattern, that there are a lot of rains. So maybe we need to shift that particular week from 15th maybe towards end of March or early April, so that by that time, you know, the rains will have basically be across the country. Because if you plant around 15th and it is dry, basically there'll be an issue. We also need to encourage ourselves, as colleagues have said, wherever you go for any function, let us encourage our people to plant and grow trees. Okay,
Would you like to be
yes,
informed?
yes, he's the owner of the bill. I'll be glad.
Senator Haji.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Senator Kesang, for your submission and support of the bill. I just wanted to inform you the week for tree planting that has been proposed in the amendment bill is supposed to coincide with the International Tree Planting Day. So in terms of moving, it will be a little bit difficult. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
It's okay, then it is noted. But basically, tree planting, we can just make it a continuous exercise. We can observe the international one, but we encourage our counties to do it throughout so that basically it becomes a way of life. When it becomes a way of life, basically it means all the time when you go to church, you plant the tree, you go to school, you encourage, our people to plant trees so that basically we achieve this cover and we sensitize our people that it is important for so many reasons, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, with those few remarks, I support the bill, and we encourage our colleagues that we support it. And I hope, Senator Aji, you've also looked for a co-sponsor in the next house, because, as we discussed yesterday, most of the bills that we pass in this house, when they go to National Assembly, they either stay in the shelves for too long or they die there. So please ensure that you get somebody to push it for you on the other side. I submit.
Thank you. Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to join my colleagues also to support the bill. I want to thank the move of the bill. I think it's the right time that we take concern of our environment and the afforestation of our lands. As aware of this country, desertification is actually encroaching so much into our lands, especially in the northern part of Kenya, and even within the Mount Kenya area. But because of deforestation, the indigenous trees are disappearing. And as a result, the land is left bare. The rainfall is so unpredictable that sometimes we might not receive the rightful rain because of the deforestation ongoing. And therefore, I think the bill now is actually giving concerns to afforestation programs, which has been there many years, but of late it has been left out. Initially, it was mostly driven by donors, but this is the right time that we need to get budget for budgetary allocations for this program of afforestation. Honorable Speaker, the climate change is with us, and it has affected any part of this country, all parts of this country, adversely. And therefore, the only way we can be able to help is to have a proper program for afforestation. Honorable Speaker, we have so many programs for youth and women that are on course in the country. But of course, if this is well planned, and the youth are engaged in afforestation programs in every part of the country, the same funds can now be diverted for afforestation while they're still being paid, where they can be able to produce seedlings, where they can be able to do the waterings. In the past, we used to have programs that there was a compulsory afforestation program where every household must plant some trees. And as a result, we used to see many trees growing up, especially in the urban centers. These same programs should be continued and should be brought back. And actually, our approach should be the indigenous trees, because indigenous trees will not have much need for water, drought, and the climate changes. Because if we have some exotic trees, then I think we will not do very well, because I can see many trees are now the indigenous trees have been replaced. Honorable Speaker, one other thing is actually northern Kenya suffers most of deforestation as a result of refugee camps, and especially even Turkana. As aware, this part of the country, because of frequent drought. Most of the trees are dying. But what happened now is even the trees that are still surviving, the refugees are cutting them and drying them, and the land is being left bare. So I think these kind of programs, we don't mind having the refugees, because if they have a problem in their countries, we can still accommodate them. But the problem is the United Nations, UNHCR, and all other Department of Refugees in the Foreign Affairs should have programs to be able to help the locals to do some afforestation. Every three cuts, then they should replace with other one. And so that at least we'll be able to maintain the forest cover in those areas. As it is now, it's just actually became a bare land. Honorable Speaker, we also need to have inculcate the idea of reforestation and afforestation to schools. Actually, you know, the child is still young. You must show that what it means to have trees, so that they can have that nature. They can nurture and have the feeling that importance of having trees everywhere. There should be school competitions. The schools which are well afforested, they should be rewarded. The schools should be paid some amount of money, so at least they can produce more and more trees, and they can afforest their schools, so that in case we can be able to impart drought desertification in those areas. Honorable Speaker, one other thing is the biggest challenge we have is actually settlements. You see, the population is increasing by the day, and more people need land. And what happens is they try to settle everywhere without plan. If you go to the other world, there are specific production systems for every area. If it's a place for farming or agriculture, it's done for only agriculture. Settlements has its own places. So, but unlike in Kenya, where everybody settles where he wants or she wants. I think that should be stopped, that we must have a proper planning for even people settling, because I know it is a population boom, people are increasing by the day, but of course we need to reserve our forest. People are now encroaching forest. If you see even Karura forest now, people are building houses. They say, oh, that we can be able to maintain the forest. It's not possible. Once you make encroachment, when trees are cut, and everybody wants to settle in the best place of Karura forest. And therefore, it's a high time that we must fight. Like the famous, what do you call that lady? Yes. So we must fight for the maintenance of the forest, and stop those guys who have little money rushing to the forest site of Ngong and Karura and these places. Honorable Speaker, one other thing is we can minimize, we can do what you call forest tax holidays, like the way it's said in the place incentives, so that at least every corporate must be able to produce a certain number of trees, and they are planting trees. They support some programs for the forest. I think that's the only way that we can be able to maintain, to have forest issues. And one other thing that the bill is not showing very well is the laws, the enforcement. The enforcement laws in forestry, afforestations, and the reservation of the forest is actually very weak in this country. So I think we need to have a very strong laws to be put in place, so that at least the consequences of cutting trees and afforestation, so that at least we can be able to maintain our forest cover. With those few remarks, I beg to support the bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Well, thank you, Senator. Senator Wakili Hilary Sige.
I thank you, Madam Speaker, for allowing me to add my voice to this very important bill. I first like to start by appreciating the Honorable Senator Abdul for sponsoring such a very important amendment to the bill, because, Madam Speaker, lately we do have the conversation around climate change as one of the most favored topical issues because of the need to conserve our environment, and this particular amendment has come at a very critical time where most, if not all, of the conversations, including in our schools, have got an aspect of tree planting and protection of trees and our forest cover. Madam Speaker, I will directly speak to the various clauses which the bill proposes to amend. And as I start off, Madam Speaker, with the proposed amendment to Section 8, where, as earlier on alluded by the Honorable Senator Matinga, I would urge the Honorable Senator Abdul to consider adding a provision under that particular proposal so that we seek to promote the planting and growing of trees. This, Madam Speaker, is as per the provisions as proposed of Section 8, which reads, Section 8B, promote the planting of trees on all public land in each county, promote afforestation and reef afforestation in arid and semi-arid areas in the country. I propose that the word grow be included after the word planting of trees, so that we don't only do the act of planting the tree itself. The most important aspect of tree planting, or rather afforestation, is growing of the trees, and it can only happen when we protect the trees which we have planted. And if that is possible, that will give a lot of effect to the provisions that is proposed to amend under Section 8, as well as Section 21 of the Forest Conservation and Management Act, subsection 1, which inserts an additional provision that will read, shall promote the planting of trees in all public land vested in the county government. Madam Speaker, that being a very important step in making sure that we achieve the objective of this act, because planting these trees without giving some policy direction in terms of law and even protection will not lead to us achieving those objectives. And I therefore urge the Honorable Senator Abdul to consider that provision. Secondly, the provision of Section 8, introduction of Section 8B-EB. This is what the draft bill reads. Establish at least one tree nursery in each county for trees sustainable for the environment and climatic conditions of the respective counties. This is a very important proposal, Madam Speaker, and I want to laud the Honorable Senator because we are going by creating a requirement that in each particular county there must be a tree nursery. We are not only going to be achieving the objective of planting trees, Madam Speaker, we will be enhancing the possibility of job creation. Earlier on, Madam Speaker, when the Honorable Senator Miraj spoke, she made reference to an effort that she's done in providing opportunities to young girls who've been retained in her foundation of tree planting. This particular one, if we provide it in law where every county has, we will be able to sustain, first of all, availability of tree seedlings across the country in all seasons across the year, because this will be a responsibility of the county governments. We will be creating job opportunities for the young ones who will be working in those tree nurseries. By extension, we are going to keep them engaged as against their being idle and engaging in activities which are not necessarily productive to them. Madam Speaker, when this provision is made into law, it is going to provide an aspect that is beyond just the growth of the trees. The proposal, Madam Speaker, under Section 40 of the Forest Conservation and Management Act, where there is a proposal that reads, a person who harvests a tree shall replace the tree under the direction and in an area designated by the service. I have a problem with this particular provision, and I wish the Honorable Senator Cherargei would have allowed the mover of this bill to listen to my contribution. The requirement that the service...
The Senator to be heard in silence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is very important because the provision in the proposed law is that the service will be required to provide direction and designate a place where replacement of trees having been harvested will be done. I have a problem with this because designing or designating the role to the service can prove to be impossible, because having harvested a tree, what guarantee do I have as the person who has harvested or as a member who wants to replace that tree will I have in terms of making sure that the service or those who are in the service are available to designate a place and to provide direction for that particular provision. Honorable Senator, I would request that you relook at that provision so that we are made to have an obligation in law without necessarily having the obligation on the part of the service or the officers of the service to designate a place for purposes of replacement. But otherwise, the general provision of the bill to make sure that every person who's harvested must make sure that they replace. And I would propose that instead of even providing that you cut one, you replace by one, we can as well just provide that you replace by planting more than one tree if you have harvested one, more than 5 if you have harvested 5, to ensure that we hasten the replacement capacity of the trees which we are planting. Madam Speaker, the introduction under that subsection 40A of a fine for persons who contravene the provisions of this law is a very welcome move. The reason, Madam Speaker, is that if you are to be fined, the law provides that if you are found to have contravened the provisions of subsection 1 or 2, you have committed an offense, and you are liable on conviction to a fine not exceeding 5 million Kenya shillings, or to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 3 years, or to both such fine and imprisonment. Introduction of this particular fine, or rather the creation of an offense leading to a fine once you've been found convicted, Madam Speaker, will ensure that the rest of us Kenyans, who are not normally very keen in making sure that we comply with the law, will be able to comply with the law, because the punishment in itself is punitive enough to make sure that people comply with this law, and that provision is a welcome move. Madam Speaker, there is still a provision under the proposed amendment to Section 54 of the Forest Conservation and Management Act, where the taxman, Kenya Revenue Authority, is expected to create some sort of an incentive to ensure that not only the public, but also private forest proprietors are given an incentive. The introduction of subsection D, which provides that income and other tax deductions will be an aspect that the Kenya Revenue Authority will provide to private entities in order to ensure tree planting programs. This is one of the most important things that will be an incentive, not only to now the public who are protecting the forest, but also to private proprietors and those who have availed themselves to implement programs on tree planting, in this case, are given an incentive. If, for example, you are allowed to get a tax waiver by virtue of you planting certain number of trees, this way many of us and many private forest owners will push their limits to ensure that they maximize on the amount of the possible tax that they can achieve when this particular provision is implemented by the Kenya Revenue Authority. The provisions of Section 55, which seeks to amend the law by introduction of a 1-week tree planting observation week. In this will make sure that every Kenyan is under an obligation within that period of 1 week to support the process of tree planting, so that we run away from the pronouncements that we always rely on or expecting the president or his team of leadership to gazette a day. When we have this period between 15th of March and 21st of March every year, this week will be a week dedicated to tree planting. And in ensuring that this becomes law, we will enhance the support that we would desire to give to the pronouncements by the president to target the achievement of over 15 billion trees in a period of 10 years. Further to the proposed amendment to Section 57, the law as proposed by the Honorable Senator is to ensure that every person who is licensed to harvest trees is required to replace each harvested tree in accordance with directions of the service. This is more or less the earlier provision which I said we should remove the responsibility of directing and designating a particular place to the service. Whoever has been licensed to harvest trees, because we have got so many sawmillers across the country who harvest trees when they are mature enough, this requirement that they are in law supposed to replace trees, we should remove it from the service to direct and provide it in law that once you have been given a certain number of trees to harvest in a certain forest, whether it is public or private, as a licensed harvester or as a licensed person, you are under an obligation or required to replace them. It is a good move. What we only need to do is to make sure that we have got a policy on implementation so that those who are unable to implement within the provisions of that law are made to be subjected to the provisions of law in terms of creation of offense and also the penalties available. Madam Speaker, when you look at the forest cover from across the country, I have looked at the statistics, and the county that I represent, Bomet County, has got a forest cover of 24%. That is not enough. We are targeting to push to make sure that we have beyond 50%, and the sponsor of this bill, Senator Abdul, has got a forest cover of 10.3%. This is a very important proposal that Senator Abdul is making. It will support in ensuring that we not only achieve the presidential call to enhance tree planting to make sure that we achieve the 15 billion within 10 years, but also ensures that we go by the global move currently in terms of protection of the climate, protection of our forest cover, and the benefits that come alongside creation of very many forests within our areas. To the Honorable Senator, this is a very important bill, and I support and look forward to all the members, both within this House and outside this House, to support this move to make sure that we enhance our forest cover in the entire jurisdiction of Kenya, and we gain the benefits of the extended tree cover. Madam Speaker, I thank you and I support.
Thank you, Honorable Senator. Senator Margaret Kamar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to support this bill. And I would like to congratulate Senator Haji for coming up with a wonderful piece of legislation to take care of our forestation programs. Madam Speaker, I would like from the onset to mention that promotion of afforestation and reforestation in arid and semi-arid areas has been very low. And I think what this law is doing is to be deliberate in bringing afforestation, and I congratulate our colleague, because 80% of Kenya is ASAL. It's arid and semi-arid. It's only 20% of the country that actually has enough moisture for us to say that you can plant crops. And unfortunately, we are losing more land. We are losing Kiambu. We are losing a lot of Limuru pieces of land to buildings. So we are reducing the 20%, and we have the 80% that requires a lot of attention. So this bill is going to do wonders once it is implemented, and I think it is very important that we not only support, but we also implement. We push for the implementation of this afforestation of ASAL areas of this country. Madam Speaker, promoting the planting of trees at all public institutions is a very quick win. It is the easiest way of doing things because we have land that belongs to public institutions, land that belongs to schools, to and any other institutions that are completely bare. And this is going to give us a lot of coverage. If we can aim at getting 10 to 15% of each public institution planting trees, we will actually have a very, we'll move a long way. A few amendments I would like to propose to our colleague. One is on Article 2BEB, where he says that we need to establish at least one tree nursery in each county for trees suitable for the environment. I would like to suggest that we be more ambitious and not just talk of one tree nursery, but have one tree nursery per public, primary, or secondary school. This is very important because in our days, as young people, we used to plant trees. Madam Speaker, I visited my tree, my primary school tree, and I found it was still standing huge as it is, and it is ready actually for harvesting, if it has not been ready for a few years. So if we use the primary schools also as a unit, and I want to persuade my colleague that it is, we can say at least one that is run by the county government, but actually all our primary schools and all our secondary schools should have tree nurseries. Not only that, we need to inculcate a tree planting behavior to our children when they are very young. Somebody mentioned earlier about the Moi era. The Moi era was really an environmental era because we had soil conservation days and we had tree planting days, and it started from the youngest. You find that the youngest children were actually planting trees. The beauty with having trees planted by students and having nurseries in schools is that we can be assured of the protection. I also have seen one of the functions that the bill is attributing to the service is that of promoting forestry education and training. I think from out of that, we would like to see, apart from agricultural fogai clubs, as they used to call them, we need to have environmental and tree planting clubs in primary schools and in secondary schools. Not to mention that with CBC coming, it is very important that we also have a course on afforestation, conservation, and climate change, so that it becomes part of us and part of what we are doing. So tree planting, I think we need to go back to make ourselves very sensitive, make our children very sensitive to environmental behavior. One other thing that used to be in those olden days were the Chiefs Act. The Chiefs Act was used to protect the environment. At the same time, it was used to protect water courses, so that water catchments were protected under the Chiefs Act, and tree felling, you would not be allowed to fell a tree without asking for permission, whether it was in a public facility or in your own farm. And this is what would make this Article 40A monitorable, because when we talk of a person who harvests a tree shall replace the tree under the direction of in an area designated by the service, you will find that that can only happen if you are in a forested area. That if you fell a tree, but of course you must again have a permit to even fell that tree. But once that has been done, you can only be designated if it is within a forested area or a forest land. But what about our own pieces of land? We need to start controlling the tree felling. I remember when tree felling was banned, it was banned even in private lands, and it helped regenerate forests within the country. So we need to relook at that and see how we can marry the Chiefs Act so that, as our colleague Wakili Sigei was saying, on the issue of on the issue of tree felling and regulating the the felling of the trees, it is not only by permits from the service, but it is good to make sure that there is accountability on the ground. So let's see how we can bring it down so that the Chiefs Act can also be, we can affect the Chiefs Act much later. We can revisit that if it is still there, because I don't think it has been referred to in a long time. But we can bring what was in the Chiefs Act also here, so that we are talking of the designated service / the chiefs of the area. Those are the people who will see from the first instance if things are going wrong, and they are the ones who can monitor if you have actually planted or not. I think when we talk of forest conservation, for us to be able to conserve, let's conserve both what is in the public land and what is in our private lands. Madam Chair, the other thing I want to persuade my colleague is that is the issue of a planting week. I wanted to persuade him to have a planting month. Planting month from 15th of March to 15th of April. Why? It's because of the rainfall pattern that is in this country. We know that that is the main rain season, and if we can allow a month, then the minister responsible will be able to organize so that you start your planting right from Mandera and come all the way to Lake Victoria. So 1 month would be more reasonable to me than 1 week. And we don't want, again, to apply the week, and then when there is a drought, then we can't do anything. So I'm requesting my colleague that we observe a national tree planting month from 15th March, as he has said, all the way to 15th of April. Madam Speaker, I don't think there is any other amendment I would like to introduce except to congratulate my colleague, because this is a wonderful piece of law. Thank you, and I support.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Mogeni Eric Okowa.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to also contribute to the Environment Laws Amendment Bill that have been sponsored by my good friend, Senator Haji. Madam Speaker, in the era that we are living in, we all know the pose that is posed by climate change, especially careless cutting of trees. What is occupying the attention of many governments now is the idea of protecting our environment and ensuring that our countries have good forest cover so that we have sustainable management of our forests. So I want to thank Senator Haji for coming with this bill that introduces some punitive measures and that also wants to guide our county governments on the steps they need to put in place to ensure that we attain a good forest cover. And Senator Haji, this did not start just with you. If you read our 2010 Constitution, it prescribes that as a country we need to attain 10% tree cover of the entire country. So what you are doing is trying to align these laws to the spirit and the intention of the 2010 Constitution. So I'm fairly impressed with the ideas that you have incorporated in this bill. And some of us who are in primary school during the tenure of President Daniel Arap Moi saw a sustained campaign by the late President Moi to plant trees, even on road reserves. When I was in class 5, and I was traveling from Nyamira to Kericho, where I was a primary school student, we were stopped in a town called Kapkatet. I'm sure Senator Joyce knows that place. We were stopped in a place called Kapkatet, and the DCs were implementing a decree that had been issued by President Moi. Any public vehicle that was plying that route, and I believe in other public roads, were being stopped. You step out, you plant a tree before you proceed. And I think what Moi wanted to achieve was to create an environment of what we see in the US. If you drive in the US, on both sides of the road, it's basically a forest. And I think that's what Moi wanted. And up to date, if you travel between Sotik and Kericho, you will see a tree cover on the road reserve. That is an effort that was spearheaded by President Moi. Even the idea of soil erosion. You know, what we forget is that afforestation contributes a great deal in ensuring that deforestation does not take place, and more so, soil erosion. Moi did a fantastic job, Madam Speaker, only that as Kenyans, we did not follow. We did not take it seriously. I'm sure if we had taken Moi's effort seriously, by now, we'll be having maybe more than 10% tree cover in our country. And then let's also applaud the work that was done by the late Wangari Maathai. When people wanted to grab Karura Forest. I was at that time serving as the chair of Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. And there were powerful people in government who had wanted to grab Karura Forest, that beautiful tree cover you see in Gigiri near the UN headquarters, was at risk of being grabbed. And working jointly with the late Professor Wangari Maathai, we filed many cases in court, and we managed to cancel titles that had been issued to private individuals. So, Senator Haji, the effort that you are doing today resonates very well with our champions of environmental conservation that have lived in the past years. I would like you to even go a step further and borrow from what happens in some countries in the West. I remember when I was the chair of Law Society and I visited Australia, and I went to a friend's place, and a branch of a tree had fallen, and I was asking him, where can you chop the tree? And Madam Speaker, he said, for you to cut any tree, you make an application to the local authority. They will undertake public participation before you are allowed to cut that tree. That's how serious some countries take the issue of cutting trees. So what has been proposed here is actually not very radical. It's not very radical. I wish Senator Haji can go a step further. If you drive, I think, along UN, I hope I'm not getting the name of the road wrong. If you drive, I think it's UN Avenue, past the UN headquarters as you go into Runda, and as you drive from Limuru Road. Madam Speaker, you will see that there has been a sustained effort of cutting trees. I don't know for what purpose along that road. And the beauty that used to be there is long gone. But I don't think the person who is doing that exercise has been taken through a very rigorous process before he was given permission to cut those trees. How I wish, Madam Speaker, we can improve this bill to have real public participation before anybody is allowed to cut trees within our urban centers. In fact, if I remember correctly, what that lawyer told me is their public participation, you conduct a vote. You know, people who reside in that estate are invited to cast a vote and either answer in affirmation whether they support the cutting of that tree or not. And then you'll be given a permit that is conditional, that if you chop that tree, you must plant another one in replacement. So those are the kind of laws that we need to incorporate here, Senator Haji, because the target in this country is to plant 870 million trees to enable us meet the constitutional threshold of 10% tree cover in the country. If you leave it to our governors, Madam Speaker, and we don't put in place stringent laws that can discourage the cutting of trees, we'll wake up and find instead of increasing our tree cover, we'll be reducing it. And I like the idea of ensuring that we have seedlings, that nurture trees that are friendly to us. We are one of the most adversely affected regions. Senator Onyonka's county of Kisii and Nyamira. I don't know who introduced these blue gums to our region. You are lucky, Madam Speaker, where you come from. You had Wangari Maathai, professor. She discouraged the planting of gum trees. In my county of Nyamira, Madam Speaker, most of our streams, water streams, have dried up. People are trekking long distances to look for a river where they can fetch water. Because we were never properly guided, we planted gum trees in, very close to our river banks. And we now have a serious water scarcity in Kisii and Nyamira counties. So the idea of ensuring that the seedlings that are put up by our county governments contain seedlings that are friendly to our environment is so important, Senator Haji. And I wish you can even strengthen that and include some research. You know, before you are allowed to set up a seedling, there should be some research that has been undertaken so that we plant trees that are friendly to our environment. Madam Speaker, everything is about sustainable management of our environment for the future generations. Those who will be living after us in the next 100 years. What will they find? What did we leave behind? If you leave a country that has no water, you'll be creating a situation where war will break out. River Nile here that serves, I think, 9 countries. 9 countries, including the Egypt, the Sudan. Madam Speaker, there is a clause there that if you do anything that endangers that River Nile, it can be a ground for war. So I think I support this bill, Senator Haji, and I think we should all support it. Let us see how we can enhance the offenses that you have created so that people can be conscious that we are really serious as a country in protecting our environment. The only way we can assist President William Ruto to achieve is, I think you had something in your manifesto, green legacy economy, is to assist in passing such kind of laws. Without laws, Madam Speaker, people will carelessly cut trees, sell charcoal. I don't know where the charcoal comes from. If you drive along narrow Mayu Road, you'll find motorcycle riders carrying 5 sacks of charcoal. I don't know which forest is being endangered in that ecosystem. So we should deliberately put in place laws that discourage such kind of acts to ensure that our country attains the 10% tree cover as envisaged in our Constitution. So I support the bill, Madam Speaker, and really congratulate Senator Haji for coming up with these amendments. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Joyce Correll.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to also congratulate the Senator Haji, for the amendments that is before the floor of this House. And maybe before that, Madam Speaker, allow me also to welcome the honorable members of this House from the long recess. I know it has been long, but I just want to say that welcome back and to the business. Madam Speaker, I want to really thank the honorable senator for the amendments that he has brought to this House, and also to thank the government for the few steps that they have made in terms of making sure that environmental issues are addressed, especially the tree planting, which has been witnessed in some few years that has passed. And also want to echo the sentiments of Honorable Omogeni, where the first leaders of this country, the retired President Moi, did a lot in terms of making sure that the trees were planted along the way or along the highway, which can also still be witnessed in some of the areas. Madam Speaker, the amendment is trying to promote the planting of trees in all public land. And Madam Speaker, I want to also bring to the attention of the members that there was a suggestion that we need to have the Green Army. I don't know whether it is in the Act, but this was supposed to assist the counties in terms of implementation, because every now and then we have the Environmental Day, we do the planting and we leave up to the next season. We don't know whether there are some which needs replacements before even the next planting season comes, and these are the only people who can assist us in terms of making sure that these trees are managed well. The Act also is trying to establish at least one tree nursery in each county. I would want to request the Senator Haji that it would have been prudent for us maybe to have established one nursery in every constituency. every constituency. This is because in every constituency, it will be able to serve the schools around those areas and even the PIs that are within those particular constituencies. So establishing in one county might be far, but having it within the constituencies might be a bit convenient to the members of that particular county. So I would suggest that we have it at least one nursery in every sub-county. Madam Speaker, I don't want to labor much. Much has been said by the colleagues, but I want to say that as when we discuss about this amendment again, I would also want to suggest that it would have been prudent again to include, because most of the issues that have been affecting environment in this country is lack of coordination between the relevant ministries. You find the Ministry of Environment is trying their best in terms of making sure that the environment is well taken care of, but sometimes you find also the Ministry of Lands capping some land to the public to an extent that you find a lot of complaints where I can call it land crapping issues are happening, and that is why you find IDPs across the country is because of the misunderstanding between the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Lands. These are the government ministries which are supposed to coordinate, say that wherever they are issuing title deeds, they should be issuing title deeds based on a well-researched point of view to make sure that these complications are not brought to an extent that affects the environment. Most of the declaration that has been done because of lack of coordination between the ministries. So I would also want to suggest that if there is any amendment that has to be done, there should be a coordination between the line ministries, say that these issues that have been affecting us in terms of eviction is put to an hold. So is put to an end. So I just want to say that I really support the honorable member for the amendment that he has brought. I also want to suggest that despite the fact that we have the bill and we have all these amendments, we need to have the resources, because the resources can enable the county governments and even the national government to make sure that they already identified public lands are well fenced and they are able to coordinate together with the people or the residents of those particular areas. So I just want to rest at that, but I just want to say that I really support this bill and looking forward to being approved by this House and even to the next House. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Senator. Senator Onyonka Richard Mamoita.
Madam Speaker, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this really amazing bill. Madam Speaker, for me, I have realized since I came to the Senate, it has dawned on me that if Kenyans, or at least the leadership of this country, was to visit Kenya, then they would understand why such bills would make a lot of sense in our country. Madam Speaker, recently we went to Mandera. And indeed, I believe the reason why Senator Haji has brought this bill is because he comes from there. It was amazing to see how our brother, the former governor of Mandera and even the current governor, and I'm sure Mr. Haji also, that team has done in Mandera what was very, very surprising. And I want to congratulate them because, Madam Speaker, this is a place where you walk in and you see it's a desert, but yet you see what human endeavor can do. You see what people who mean well for their people can do. Madam Speaker, they have planted trees. They have hired women who are disadvantaged because of the environment and the circumstances. And these women are the ones who are actually pouring water on these trees. And as we speak, Madam Speaker, they have done close to 250,000 trees. What was most shocking to us who had never been there is that those trees were specifically picked for the environment under which they were planted. And what shocked me, before we kept talking about the muarubaini, and we were looking at it from the health perspective. And yet, in reality, the Mwarobaini is a hardened tree. It's a tree that the governor mentioned to us that they actually had to go and pick from Dubai the nursery pieces which they used initially to start the program. Number two, we were shocked also that the county of Mandera has actually set up nurseries for growing those trees, and there was even information which were given that more research is being done so that those trees can grow faster, they can grow better and create a better environment, which it is. Number two, Madam Speaker, I want to say that Kenyans should remember, and indeed the leadership in this House should remember, that the United Nations Environmental Program is in Kenya. It's in Nairobi. That has been one of the biggest stories since 1979 when they came here the first time, Madam Speaker. And what having UNEP here meant was not that this should be the center where international conferences on the environmental issues are held. Yes, that was one of them. But the second issue was the fact that Kenya as a country was supposed to be a model country. So that when those people are coming internationally to come and see what the UNEP has done in Kenya and what Kenya has done as a member of UNEP, so that we can show them and showcase what we've done. Unfortunately, we didn't succeed, but as you know, Madam Speaker, it is through Her Excellency, the great leader of this country, Madam Wangari Maathai, who saved Karura Forest, who saved Uhuru Park, and many other environmental areas that were supposed to be saved. And yet, of course, Madam Speaker, if you look, the reality is that this bill that has been brought by our brother here is a wonderful bill. I agree with you. The only what we need to increase on or add on is that, Honorable Haji, in other countries, and if we look at the international best practice, they have actually environmental police. These are individuals who don't carry guns. They're given regions. They're given vehicles where they inspect, where they look. This can be deposed at the county governments or at the sub-county, like one of my colleagues has talked about. I also wanted, Honorable Haji, if there's a way where we can begin and start discussing what has been happening in terms of our education on matters environment. You notice the issue of carbon credits has come recently. I'm sure that the university has not been emphasizing deeply and discussing that science and what it means to our environmental protection and support.
When we resume, Senator Onyonka will have 15 minutes to continue with the debate. Honorable Senators, it's now 1 p.m., time to adjourn the House. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until later today, Wednesday, 12 February 2025 at 2:30 p.m.